Ladies and gentlemen, we're back with Season 2, Episode 24, Mystery on the Friendship Express. This is the episode in which Pinkie Pie takes the cakes, as in the cake's cake. She conveys the cake's cake to the contest. Competition? Anyways, we also see Gustav's eclairs, Joe's donuts, and Mulia's, moose. But then someone ate pieces of them, and we have a, murder mystery on the Orient Express kind of thing going on. That's the episode. Aren't they doing the baking and canterons? Well, that's ridiculous. That was one of my first thoughts, too. I'm serious. Okay. So the episode begins with kind of a mild joke. They're trying to convey the cake in order to get it to the contest conjecturally. Consequently, no, I'm not good at alliteration. There's a lot of alliteration in this episode. Like, a lot of alliteration in this episode. Holy crap. But anyway, so as they're moving the cake along, I cannot be the only one who kept having, really mild anxiety watching it wibble and wobble all over the place, it can't just be me. It looks like it should have fallen over 4 or 5 times. Yeah, and Mr. Cake had fallen over too. Oh. And I do have to point out, though, because even though it's funny, and it is, I have to point out they trust Pinkie Pie with the conveyance. Do you notice that? I mean, that actually makes sense, doesn't it? Remember, they were very hesitant to trust Pinkie Pie with anything serious, and then Pinkie Pie took care of their children. Pretty sure they care more about the children than their cake. But I only point it out because it is nice to show that they do trust her with this. Despite his anxiety, at no point do they say, no, we'll do it to someone else, right? Nice little touch. I'm not sure if that counts as a continuity counter, but nice little touch. I'd like to think that's a continuity. That's a growth thing. Let's add that. Let's add that. So, you also notice in the background there was they had the thing set up. I forget what it's called. It's the barriers that prevent people from going in, when there's a parade. And there were ponies out there going, woo, go, cheering them on. Just very brief thing in the background that I thought was pretty cool. Because, they're representing Ponyville, so that makes sense. And apparently Ponyville has the best sprinkles, according to Donut Joe. Speaking of continuity counter, Donut Joe. He counts as one, too. You may or may not remember him from The Best Night Ever. He was the guy who was at the donut shop that Spike was at. I'm pretty sure he'll show up in the future, too. I know Gustav shows up in the future. I don't remember if Mulia does. Mulia. You really, Savacom? Well, then, we're going to have to kill Spirit of Memory just to show you a lesson. Of course, now it doesn't pop. So, they get there. They remove the damn wall. How do they keep it safe in the train? No, I thought that was someone else. I could look that up really quick. Hang on. Because that was right here. A friend indeed. Listen, Spirit of Memory, it's not my fault that we're going to kill you horribly. I mean, I guess it is kind of our fault for killing you horribly. Never mind, I take that back. There she is. Matilda. No, that's Matilda, who is actually voiced by the same woman who voices Zecora. Whereas Mulia Miles is voiced by a guy. I don't remember his name, but I remember noticing that because I'm trying to look up voice actors as we go. By the way, this episode was written by Amy Keating Rogers, who also did Cutie Pox and A Friend Indeed, which I liked. That was the episode I was just referencing. She also did Last Roundup, which I really didn't like. But anyways, moving on. This is... So, unlike the last episode, which was chock full of good lessons and smart storytelling, this episode is just fun. There's nothing wrong with that, really. As long as it's good fun, I'm with it. This is basically a filler episode, but it's still a well-done filler episode. Hello, TMS Mushroom. So I'm still down. So, speaking of which, that then leads us to the introduction of the guys I just talked about them. Gustav and his eclairs. He also has a lamp, just to make them look more fancy. We see Donut Joe, I already mentioned him, and his Donutopia. And I also love, that's going to make my donut shop famous forever! And then we see Mulia, who comes in with the moose. And I will kill you, Savicon. I'll res you afterwards, but you're going to experience the death. I'm just saying. Anyways. Which leads me with the first and most important thing I want to talk about in this entire episode. Anyone else hungry now? I already said this during chat, but I am actually kind of grateful for the fact that I'm going grocery shopping pretty much right after this. Because we actually have a good bakery around here, too. I don't know if they're open right now. I'm going to be sad if they're not. But I am totally going to get something because holy crap. They just... Yeah. That being said, I want to talk about the desserts themselves. So the which is the, oh god, marzipan, meringue, something else, man. I forget the whole thing. Hang on, I had it written down here. Oh, I lost it, didn't I? I did lose it. No. The cake. Mascarpone. Thank you. That's the other M. The mascarpone meringue. Something marzipan, mascarpone, meringue, madness. And then we have... Oh, I'm sorry, Sierra Mike. Then we had... Yeah, the... By the way, this episode made me laugh several times. And one of the gags I want to point out was... We have to defend the... And then Rarity goes... And then Pinkie Pie goes... Anyways. So, we've got the... We've got the eclairs. Now, eclairs seem kind of simple, but good eclairs are really good. And so just eclairs in general are totally a valid thing. That then leads us to the Donutopia, which looks like, again, somewhat simple but well arrayed donuts. And that then leads to the chocolate mousse. Oh yeah, I've tried to make eclairs and I have failed. I don't mind admitting that because I'm not a good baker. Which one would you want the most? Like you are now the judge, one of the judges at the competition. Which one of these would you actually go ahead and vote for? Just for fun. Actually, Aethel, in the original script, Applejack did in fact take a bite, and they decided to reject that because of time concerns. Yeah, Dream Whisperer shared a lovely looking French dessert during the break too, which So we've got one for mousse, second for mousse, one for eclairs. Sierra Mike takes the probably whichever you ate first. So Shikor goes for the mousse as well. Sean goes for the Donutopia. Interesting. I would go with the personally, because eclairs are great, donuts are great. So those are both like really tied for me. Like really good donuts and really good eclairs are both excellent. I have to admit the mousse just makes me kind of go, it's just mousse. Like mousse is neat and all, don't mistake me, but it's just mousse. I've had mousse. It's shaped mousse. A side dish of Medusa heads. Ugh. No, I would go with the because first of all, I tend to like fruity flavors in general when it comes to desserts. But second of all, because it sounds like a wonderful combination of flavorings. Marzipan, oh god, I've already forgot. Marzipan, meringue, and the other thing, all combined. Kind of have a citrusy, lemony kind of a flavoring going on there. I think that would be really good, personally. But moving on, of course. So, look at my notes here. One interesting little tidbit, mascarpone, thank you. One little interesting tidbit is Pinkie's like, we must defend it, and everyone else says, yeah, sure, whatever. And everyone else just leaves. Now, that actually struck me as unusual, but I think that actually works. And the reason why is because most of the people who were leaving were doing so because they had an ulterior motive. 3 of 5, actually. They were specifically leaving because they wanted to go and eat parts of the cake. Yeah, they were in cahoots, exactly. Now, this is why I say this is still a good episode despite being filler. Because even though it's a mystery episode, right? But they actually do give you the clues early on. The silhouette who is going by is clearly Rainbow Dash. And if you look at it again, you'll see what I'm talking about. When you go to see, when she goes to the front to figure out who's shoveling coal, so that is, I wouldn't say that's clearly Fluttershy, but she has yellow coat, and it's clearly a female model, female pony model, which is noticeably different from a male pony model, which is what the actual conductor is. Then, the third one is probably the most obvious one, the eyelash. And if you pay attention, and I was this time because I was curious if they did their homework, and they did, every time the portrait is shown before the impact, there's no eyelash. The second time, the eyelash is there, and is there until Twilight removes it, at which point it's not there anymore. So they do actually put the clues there in advance. So, I want to say one other thing, and I know I'm going to get yelled at for it again. Look, I'm just saying, Dakota, that I really want to play Bloodstain. I do want to say, this is part of the biggest reason, episodes like this are why I say you could do Ace Attorney cases that are not freaking murder mysteries. You can lay the pieces in advance and have multiple suspects and have cross-examination, and you can do all this sort of stuff without there being a freaking murder mystery. Right? I cannot be the only one who's like, come on! Sorry, I'm going to let that go. I know nobody else in the world agrees with me on this. It's just, I really think that they could branch out with the Ace Attorney series on something other than murder cases. Any chance I'll be doing Batman Beyond or anything like that? Possible. TMS Mushroom. What you're seeing right now is our method to try and get something else show-wise into my show. Let me try to say that more clearly. My schedule is absolutely crammed. I don't have time for anything in my life right now. However, in order to try and make it so we can cover more than 2 shows at once, we came up with the Streaminations idea, which is what we're doing right now. So, the schedule is very full because we're not doing another Streamination. We're doing the one Streamination, which is My Little Pony, until we're done. After that, however, the possibility of other shows being added to the Streamination format is absolutely on the board. So, in the future would be the answer to you, theoretically and hypothetically, of course. The vortex of murder is what murdered that poor Eclair. It didn't do anything to anybody. It was just delicious. And glorious. Anyways. So Pinky gets out her Sherlock hat, which is adorable. You'll notice this is the first time we also start to see Rarity after the scene of the crime. And continuing with the theme of putting the clues on camera, you'll notice that Rarity is all of a sudden doing this with her hair. And you'll notice the camera pans across her multiple times, showcasing that she is doing her hair differently, just in case you're paying attention. I will freely admit, the first time I saw this episode, I didn't catch the first 3 clues. The Rarity hair thing I caught immediately, and was like, wait a second. I didn't catch the significance of it, but, you know, I mean, it was noticeably different, so it was like, So I assumed Rarity did it, which was partially correct. This then leads to, yes, this is based on the Murder at the Orient Express. That's the thing this is parodying. This then leads to probably my overall favorite part of the episode. So she accuses Gustav, Joe, and Mulia. So first we accuse Gustav, who is straight up Snidely Whiplash. And I mean straight up. Ignoring the obvious grainy black and white and then the title cards for the dialogue because it's a silent film, there's also the fact that he ties Pinky to the train tracks and twirls his mustache. Like, they just hit every point. It's great. And he even uses the saw blade to destroy the cake. This then leads to Joe. I actually had to look it up because I couldn't tell what Pinky was saying. Apparently, his real name is Maine. Con Maine. To go with the Bond parallel. And, of course, you know, the Bond parallels are obvious. Tons of gadgets, very Carmen Sandiego style. And he's all suave the entire time. Completely on top of things. And all the women ponies are like, oh, he's so dreamy. Even at the end, they're like, they cling to his legs, which I swear is straight out of one of the Bond posters. The woman clinging to the leg, you know. Yeah. Then, that leads to... Yeah, he's a ponies man. That then leads to the anime one. The ninja style, anime movement lines, the Ninja Gaiden thing. And then the cake falls apart in the background. It's just fun. I don't have much to say about it. It's fun. I enjoyed it. Like I said, filler. Good filler, though. And then, all of that is, of course, total nonsense. This then leads to something that I want to share, because... So the stated Aesop of the episode is, don't accuse without proof, which is a good Aesop. However, I don't think the episode actually really hits that point all that well, personally. It is a good Aesop. You shouldn't accuse without proof. That's a good lesson. But I don't think the episode showcases that. If anything, the lesson that the episode showcases is another one, which I'm going to get to in just a second. So let's shelve that for a moment. But the third lesson in the episode, and the one that I find most interesting, is being a good sport. I want you to think about this for just a second. I want you to think about how many times in real life and in fiction competitors have dissed and bashed and thrown mud at each other. Have said, oh, your stuff is crap, and it's terrible and pathetic. It'll never actually accomplish anything. You're worthless and awful. Or your bakery stuff is worthless and awful. Or your painting is terrible. Or that program's never going to succeed. And yet what we see is a fairly lengthy sequence where Pinkie Pie goes out of her way, despite her convictions that the is better, to showcase just how good her competitors are. That scene has always stuck out in my mind, because it's rare that you see that kind of good sportsmanship, especially in fiction. You see all the prosecutors in the Ace Attorney series. That's an excellent example. I think Edgeworth has only very recently finally gotten to the point where he has acknowledged that we actually have a worth of a damn. Right? So yeah, it was a nice little scene, and it does help to showcase that. And it is very in character for Pinkie Pie and the way that she thinks, because she's not really that kind of abrasive person. This then leads to the second layer of the mystery, which is a lot shorter, of course, and has basically no real hints or clues as to what happened. It's just, so they're like, oh god, I have no idea what happened. This then leads to, so actually, I'm skipping ahead, sorry. What happens is Twilight is like, okay, here, let's actually go get clues. They go get clues. They come back, that's when the eyelash comes up, and then she accuses Rainbow Dash, Fluttershy, and Rarity. As usual, Tabitha St. Germain is amazing. I confess, I wear false eyelashes. And I took a bite out of the cake. Now here's the thing. The problem is the episode, this then leads immediately to the idea that the other bakers did the same thing, that they could not resist their competitors' treats. Not out of ill will, but just because they sounded so good. Are you kidding, Zavagam? I point this out because this then leads to the second Aesop, which I mentioned earlier. This is not a good Aesop. It's okay to eat something that isn't yours as long as it tastes really good. Now, how many of you ever heard of roommate etiquette? So, I'm going to go ahead and admit something to my shame. When I was much younger, I didn't really have roommate etiquette. I mean, I say roommate, I'm saying that so generically. There's actually a lot of things that fall under roommate etiquette. But the thing that always comes to my mind first and foremost is food. You don't eat your roommate's food unless you have permission, right? Now, there's actually a caveat to that. It's okay to eat their food if you immediately replace it. So, like, for example, let's say that you find a pack of Twizzlers and you go, oh, nom, nom. It is now incumbent upon you to go replace those freaking Twizzlers. Now, this is the interesting thing. To leave hypothetical from one, how many of you in real life have ever been really tempted to eat something you probably shouldn't have, either from your parents when you were a kid, or something your roommate had, or maybe it's just something you yourself were saving for later? You know that feeling? I'm of course mostly speaking about desserts, but this applies in general. I myself have actually had this problem with certain weird things back when I was a lot more, nutritionally challenged, I think is the way I want to phrase that. There was this one night, I'll never forget this. There was this one night I was living with several people, and I got up in the middle of the night and I was basically starving, and I couldn't help myself effectively. So I went to the fridge and I got out the thing of milk and I just started drinking the milk because I needed calcium. Well, I was craving milk. I was specifically craving milk, and so I was like, glug, glug, glug. Now, by that point in my life, I'd already gotten past, being a mooch, and I owned up to it and bought people, I replaced the milk the next day. But, yeah. The reason I bring this particular Aesop up is I think this is probably the biggest failure in the episode. Because, as weird as it may sound, there's nothing necessarily wrong with giving into those urges as long as you do it properly. Now, let me try and explain this, for example. So let's say it's just a pack of Twizzlers. Okay, no biggie. You can go down by the store and buy a new one inside of 20 minutes, right? So, not a huge issue. Let's say it's something they actually made. Well, that's a little bit trickier because you can't really replace that. So that's going to be more case by case. What if it's something they made specifically for something, like an event or a person or a birthday party? That's the point at which you probably shouldn't actually cross the line. As with most things, it's not exactly a binary thing, and I know that's a hard lesson to showcase. But this is actually a life lesson thing that I have actually tried to teach my own niece, because if you really want something, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that at the baseline, but you have to think about it. Yeah, special event item, do not touch. Leave that alone. If it's something, this could even apply if they've been saving it for something. Let me use an example. A friend of mine has a rather nice bottle of wine. I don't know the type, don't ask me. Now, he is saving that for when he moves, because he's going to christen his new place. So, if I happened to be living with him at the time and I decided to just drink that wine, that would be a no-no, because that is a special event item. Do not touch. Now, I know that's a kind of a hard Aesop to showcase in a kids show, but it was the first thing I thought of when it came to the episode, because the episode goes out of its way to showcase temptation, and here's the problem. Giving into temptation is almost always a bad thing. But in reality land, there's a reason it's called temptation, because it's hard to resist. I know that sounds like not a good Aesop, but it's worth noting that giving into temptation is the kind of thing that's going to happen. Right? You need to think about it, and you need to think to process it, and you need to do it properly and in the right circumstances. You need to have some kind of self-control over that. If you just try to resist temptation all the time, then you're the Jedi Order. And we know how that one turned out. Now, I was actually just thinking, I don't remember that short. I'm going to look that up, Dakota. I got other things to look up today, too. There it is. It's Ian McKellen. You gotta be kidding me. Yeah, it worked perfectly with dead younglings. Sorry, children. As a reminder, suicide. Anyways. Now, the funny thing is, this episode, in my opinion, forgive me for continuing to criticize a fun episode I enjoy, but this episode had the pieces in place to do that lesson. It could have been slanted in a way such that basically the idea of combining their dessert at the end was something that was brought up as something other than a last-ditch option. Because the combined dessert looks really good, right? Like, I can't be the only person who thinks that the Eclair Mousse donuts look really, really good, right? Holy crap. Did you find it, Tree Whisperer? Anyways. Yes, Celestia wanted some, which makes sense. We know that Celestia likes eating cake. We saw that in the previous episode. I don't know if that counts as a continuity counter, but that did amuse me. Anyways. Yeah, exactly, Shikor. It's such an obvious idea. And then Pinky eats the whole damn thing. Which, A, irritated me. And B is definitely a wah-wah. Yeah, that's a mega wah-wah. So that we're going to add that one to the list. Well, think about it this way. So we've got light buttery with kind of cake frosting-y on top of citrus, on top of chocolate. I think those flavors would actually go well together. Now, it's just me, personal preference, blah, blah, blah. I like weird desserts, and I cannot lie. Where's my notes? Here they are. I admit the donuts would be the odd ones out. I'll actually give you that. So that's definitely a wah-wah. That's a bad wah-wah. But we did have a continuity counter, so we're going to go ahead and... Actually, we had 2 continuity counters, so I'm going to acknowledge those ones as well. Too sugary. I'm told I have a hell of a tolerance for sweetness. I'm not sure why. Like, there's a donut. It was a white cream-filled donut with custard. And most people I knew couldn't eat more than a couple of bites of it. I could eat a whole donut. And that's not the only instance of that I can name. I can name many instances of that. Apparently, I just have a tolerance for sugar. Yeah, I know I'm fat, but this has been true my whole life. This is not a new thing. Anyways, moving on. She's constantly on a sugar high. Well, that's not true, Loner. She wasn't on a sugar high in this episode. She didn't indulge until the end. I have a really bad sweet tooth. I freely and fully admit to it. My family has... It's been known in my family for some time. Just about every time I go to see my grandparents, for example, my grandmother goes out of her way to make mint butter cookies, which probably sounds weird, so let me try and explain a little bit here. She basically makes buttery sugar cookies, and then she gets these mint Hershey Kisses, and peppermint Hershey pushes them in, and then bakes them like that. And it's a wonderful combination of flavors. And she does that just for me because no one else will eat them. So she'll always make, and I love my grandmother so much, she makes a batch just for me. Because she'll make like cookies for everyone else, like chocolate chip cookies, and that everyone else will eat. And then she'll make those, and I will eat those, because I'm the only one who likes them. She's awesome. She's a wonderful woman. She's also doing fine, for anybody worried with the current crisis. She's basically the only members of my family still alive who are in the threat range are my grandparents. So they're doing okay. A little worried. They're doing okay. They're pretty healthy. They're probably healthier than I am, if I'm being honest. Anyways, so that's everything I got for this episode. Fun episode. Filler episode. Next week, beginning of April, we'll be covering... I can't remember the name. It's the freaking... Yeah, Candlelight Wedding. Candlelight Wedding is next week. I hope you guys are going to be present for that one. I feel like we're going to have a lot to talk about because that's the big season enders. It's going to introduce the concept of the changelings to the setting. It's going to introduce a new villain. It's going to introduce 2 major new characters. This is going to be an interesting one. So, hope to see you guys next week. I'm going to go chop off a little recording.